And if rich people in the world, not just rich countries, but rich individuals and rich companies, big companies, are generating disproportionately much more greenhouse gas emissions than poor people, how do we reconcile that imbalance? Is there a more equal way of doing it? And do we need a fundamental human right here, or a declaration of fundamental rights regarding climate change, if it's going to create such a big impact?
On that kind of question, to a large extent, would require answering that kind of question to a large extent requires value judgment or value judgment, which the IPCC has no mandate to make, because what looks like a honest way or a fair way to deal with the issue to one category of people or to one country might look totally unfair to another one. So it requires value judgment, and the IPCC has no mandate to make value judgment. It assesses what science has to offer, but if value judgment are called for, then it's in the hands of policymakers or moral leaders to go a step further than what the IPCC can do.
Another point, Jean-Pascal, is if we take aviation, we've heard aircraft flying over us here, and there's shipping emissions, and then there's carbon leakage issues. But also here in Ireland, we're burning peat, but we're also creating a huge, massive emissions from our bogs, from our peatlands because of drainage. How do we deal with these sort of other emissions that are not accounted for under present negotiations or under present, say, Kyoto agreements?
It's true that accounting rules are a very important element of the climate negotiations, because one needs methodologies to account for the emissions, wherever the emissions come from, that are agreed at the international level. Because if one country takes into account this category of emission one way, and another country takes it into account another way, then no comparison is possible, and then it's a manner by which the agreement becomes perceived as unfair. So it's very important to have methodologies that are agreed by everyone, and there also the IPCC is assessing the different methodologies and is doing methodological work, but then at some point options need to be taken and choices need to be made, political choices at some point, and this is also a matter for negotiation. So there is no single answer on how to do that. It needs to be part of the negotiation.
So this conference here today, Trócaire and the universities here in Maynooth, how important is what's happening here today for Ireland, but even in the global context?
Well, I think it's very important to reflect on the ethical aspects of the climate change issue, and to do it on the basis of what science can offer, but also to complement that with what value judgment can offer. Value judgment done by moral leaders or by policymakers and by citizens who might have different values and have different judgment, actually, in which case debates and discussions about those issues are very useful, so that the political debate taking place a little later in the year in Paris in COP21 can be informed by the debates happening here around the climate justice issue, so that the best decisions, relying as well as possible on the results of science, but also relying on the conclusions of a conference such as this one, can take place.
And law, how important is it for countries to have a strong climate change law, and does it need to have targets and interim targets and sectoral targets to make it work?
Well, the IPCC assessment in the mitigation area has concluded in over several reports that to have real progress in the area of mitigation, it's important to have legislation at the national level and at the international level that captures the intentions of the country or the economic sector sometimes. That is the actor discussed. So yes, to have legislation around climate issues is something important for sure.
Some people in Ireland say that, you know, we're a very small country, so why should we be so concerned about our greenhouse gas emissions? What's your answer to that question?
Well, I wouldn't answer specifically to Irish people, because the answer can be quite generic actually. It's a case for every citizen who might think, well, I'm only one of more than 7 billion citizens, or why should I do something when the effect of my own action will be quite limited? Actually, if you stand back again and if you think about where the problem is coming from, it's coming from the accumulation, the sum of the actions of citizens and also economic actors and countries, big and small, and it's really the total which produces the effect we are seeing today. So vice versa, the solution can also come from the total of actions, big and large, at different levels, in small countries, large countries, by citizens, but also by economic, large economic actors. And it's only by the participation of all that the problem will really be tackled. So no contribution is too small, actually. In the same sense, you could say, you know, the oceans is made of drops of water. Many drops of water, but still drops of water, and every drop of water has a role.
So in the overall context of climate change, in how we're not really properly addressing it, are we being fair to the people in the developing world, to the next generation, to biodiversity? You know, do you kind of, are you concerned about the way we're behaving towards these sectors?
Well, again, I'll give you a cautious answer, because to decide whether something is fair or not involves a value judgment. So yes, the IPCC is very clear. The poor are more affected by the impacts of climate change. Yes, they are the least responsible up to now from the, for the emissions that are causing these changes in climate. Yes, of course, by definition, it's the emissions of those in the past and today which are affecting climate in the future, where the future generations, who cannot have any responsibility for what we are doing by definition, and all those are scientifically well established. But to decide whether something is fair or not, it would require value judgment, and again, the IPCC would need to stay away from that.
Finally, Jean-Pascal, have you any message for the Irish people regarding IPCC and what you're trying to achieve through all of what you're doing through AR5 at the moment? What would be your core message to us Irish people?
Well, you know, I'm not sure there's something that is really specific to the Irish people. I have a lot of admiration for John Tyndall, the Irish physicist who spent weeks in his lab to measure the effect of greenhouse gases, and his measurements allowed actually to a better understanding of the role of greenhouse gases. So it would be good if Irish people would remember his contribution to the understanding of the physics of climate change, and maybe decide to act at different levels in coherence with what Tyndall discovered more than 150 years ago in Ireland.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
That. Thank you. Is there anything there that you're not happy with, by the way, just in case?
No, I don't think so.
Right,
You know,
okay.
there are people who will criticize
Yeah,
everything and anything.